There's Elena. Hi, Elena. Can you make sure that you're off mute, please?
Can you hear me?
Oh,
All right. I think I.
wonderful. Yes.
All
All right. Well, glad to meet you in person, or almost in person, virtual person. And so, for those of you who are just joining, I am very pleased and fortunate to be able to introduce Elena Terry, who's the executive chef and founder of Wild Berries. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And after having been a traditional foods cook and working in the restaurant industry for over a decade, years ago, Elena shifted her focus on community building as she merged her passions and focused on educating through her indigenous foods. And she is a food and culinary program coordinator also for the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, as well as in partnership with the Intertribal Agricultural Council, Meskwaki Food Sovereignty Initiative, and UW Horticultural Department. And that sums up everything I know. So the rest, Elaine, is going to be for you to share with us so we can learn more about your work.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Haini P, Haini Karagiwi, Ho Chankrajada, Ha Hemani Wenga Hingaide, Naga Maithare Rajada, Elena Terry ga Hingaide. So, hello everyone. I'm excited to be here. My name is Elena Terry. As Evan said, I am the executive chef and founder of Wild Berries, which is a community outreach catering company. I am the former Food and Culinary Program Coordinator for the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance. That just switched as I welcomed aboard a new coordinator and transitioned to the lead mentor, one of the lead mentors for the culinary program. And I'm super excited to see the way the program will continue to grow. So with the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, we have this wonderful Indigenous culinary mentorship program. And that's kind of how I got started with this community building and being a participant in entering at a mentee level and getting to build these wonderful relationships with some incredible Indigenous chefs. And it was so inspiring. When I got home, I was thinking, what can I do to bring this into my community a little bit more and to really build on this wonderful foundation we have with our traditional foods? And how can we reconnect to each other, to our communities, to each other, through this beautiful, powerful food and our Indigenous foodways and traditional food systems, really. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I really work towards building community. And of course, the best way I can do that is to share a little bit of our food with you and let you see what it really means for me to be a part of this greater community, not just Indigenous foods, but to be able to have communications with my growers and build those relationships, or the people in my community that process the food. Everybody has their passions when it comes to food systems, and our food, of course, is universal. Everybody has to eat, right? So it's how you decide you're going to eat and how you choose to make those decisions for your family on a daily basis. So one of the things that I like to do is say, it's not necessarily about being completely decolonized, or you can't rely heavily on processed foods either. It's about, how can I get this into your home so that you can appreciate it in a way that slow changes will make permanent, longer changes. And one of my favorite ingredients is corn, of course, and there's so many varieties of corn. I have a few to share with you, and some of the beauty about that is that they all came from my friends or my friends' community, and I know where each of these corn is grown and who cared for it or processed it or gave it to me and I processed it. So I can see if you can kind of see that there. Let me see. So here we have some of this beautiful Oneida white corn that my friend Becky Webster gave me. And this is from their community, which is the freeze-dried dehydrated corn. This is the white corn that's been nixtamalized, which is turned into hominy, and then I dehydrated that. We have it's kind of hard to see with the white background, but this is our ho-chunk corn. And this is one of our ancestral corns that's actually grown by my grandma and my daughter. And so that corn is always really special to me. And then I have, as Evan had mentioned, I do a lot of work with continuing education. So I have a partnership with the UW Horticulture, and they grow out some different varieties for me, and I can then use those varieties to give back to the students, and I use them when we cook for events at the university or with the Native American student organization there. And it's just wonderful to say that their peers helped grow this for them. So I have this beautiful Haraneshoni black sweet corn also, and this has been processed by partially boiling it and then taking it off the cob and dehydrating it in the sun. So all these different corn can be processed different ways. It turns out a little bit differently. Some of it is saved in the seed state because sometimes you might need it for seed. And if you don't, and you have enough for the next year, then you can always make that into hominy. So there's a lot of different ways that we process it and a lot of different reasons that we process it that way. When you parboil your corn like this, Haraneshoni black sweet corn that I did, you can't plant that afterwards, but it's got this wonderful pop texture when you use it for soup. So if we have a plentiful year with some varieties, we might choose to process more that way so that you don't have to process it later into hominy, which is an extra step, but it comes into a completely different product. And so with building community and cooking with the intention that I try to promote, in not only with Wild Berries, but with the mentees and the other Indigenous chefs that I get to work with, it's about thinking about the people that grew that corn or where that corn came from. You know, we have this ho-chunk corn, this beautiful ho-chunk corn, only because our ancestors knew how important it was for us to keep that and to keep it in our lives and to keep those strains pure. And because they were protected and preserved in that way over centuries, we have it today, and we can nourish our families a little bit differently with that corn because we do have it. And it still is this wonderful ancestral corn. So I actually took all of the corn and I cooked it, and I wanted to share it with you because it is so beautiful. You can see that there's different textures from all of the different kinds of corn. I can see if I can get up. Let me see there. Perfect. And you can see that how the black sweet corn really popped open and plumped up. We have the hominy that was rehydrated, and then the dehydrated freeze-dried hominy. And it just turns into this wonderful variety of corn. And with this base, I could add, say, maple syrup to it and make it a sweet dessert, or I could grind it. We could have it like pudding or mush. There's so many things that I can do from this base, but what I wanted to do was show you how to transform this by including in some of my other communities that I absolutely love and sharing the beauty that they're able to produce from their community. When I cook, I don't just go through the motions. I think of my friends, or my aunt that processed this green chili for me from New Mexico and sent it to me in these homemade canned jars, or this red chili that I got when I went down there with my friend Tanya, and we got to try out all these different kinds of dried and processed chilies. And every time that I cook with them, I can close my eyes and it takes me back to the moment that it was given to me, or the first time that I tried that. And I think of my aunt and the work that she does in New Mexico and Arizona and our communities down there. And I bring them into my meal with me. And all of that intention helps build on this wonderful base of food. And it's our ancestral food. And every aspect of it is crucial, from growing the seeds out to processing them, to being able to share, to have enough that it's not something that these communities just keep to themselves, but that they share with other communities, or I wouldn't have it here today, right? So I wanted to show you how one of our favorite dishes here in my household, and they were really excited that I was making this today when I was thinking about how could I do a really quick demonstration and just kind of show how we really blend a lot of this intention and all of this hard work that goes in and share a meal with each other, with our family, or with the community. So I have this beautiful corn, and I actually put all of the corn except for the seed that would still need to be processed into hominy or, parboiled on some level. I took the already processed corn and put it into an Instapot, and I just cooked it for 20 minutes, and it all came out perfectly cooked on, everything is done wonderfully. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you have to do it individually, but I know that these corn kind of cook at the same time. So this is really, in my mind, a bowl full of love. It's a bowl full of good intentions and a lot of care that went into growing out each one of these corns by my friends or my family members that they were willing to share with us. And I'm going to put those all into this one bowl here. And I'm going to go ahead and add my green chili to that, which we absolutely love. I hope everybody gets, if you haven't tried that before, green chili, that roasted hatch green chili, you have to do it. So good. And a little bit of our red chili. We're going to add here in Wisconsin, we love our crema, and I like goat cheese. It has a little bit of an extra zing to it and a fresher flavor. So I have just a little bit of crema and goat cheese that I mixed up together. And it offsets the chilies a little bit, but it also holds the corn into this wonderful mixture. It just kind of wakes it up a little bit and makes sure that the chilies stick to all of it. And I have this wonderful mix. So right now it's just the goat cheese, the crema, the chilies, and then my different varieties of corn. And I'm just going to go ahead and put that in a casserole. And let it bake while the rest of the presentations are going on. And I'll hopefully be able to show you at the end what it turns out as. I'm going to use a little bit of the cedar smoked salt just to help bring out a little bit of the flavor. And at the end, I'll sprinkle it with some cheese and a little bit of saffron. But it's that easy. And this, to me, this dish is the epitome of my community and my friends and being able to share those wonderful flavors that were given to me. And I was thinking on a day like today where it's really, really cold and everybody's been separated for so long that I can think of my friends, like my grandma or my aunt, and our other friends from communities that really honor us by being able to continue these traditional practices and these traditional foodways and provide for our families, our communities, and beyond in the way that they've preserved these farming techniques, the seeds, and the way they care for everything. So I will put that in the oven, and hopefully I'll be able to pop it out and show you a little later. I am going to sprinkle just a little bit of cheese on it because we absolutely love cheese in Wisconsin, and my family will be eating this at some point. So there we go. And I'm going to put it in the oven behind me at 350 for like a half hour or so.
Thank you so much, Elena. That looks amazing. And I loved the references to the communities you love and how much work you've done to reach out to those communities and share recipes, techniques, ideas that go really far back. And we also had a few questions that we're going to, they're mostly just clarifying questions that I wanted to throw out there before we move on to the next chef, and then we'll hopefully have some time at the end where we get to see your finished casserole, and everybody wants to take virtual bites of it, so we're gonna have to figure out how to do that. One of the questions that we had was about grinding the, it says, Andrew wanted to know if you ever grind the corn into flour or grits.
Yes, and I have some right here. So it's always something that we have on board, and I absolutely love substituting out this blue corn flour that you can get in bulk and support some of the tribal communities from, say, Bow and Arrow brand LLC. But it's a wonderful substitution. I like to add it in everything. So I can bake biscuits with it. I just substitute some of the processed flour out for the corn flour. And even with gravy and stuff, it's a wonderful substitution. So grinding it down and using it like this is definitely a delicious way to honor the corn flour as well.
Excellent. And they each have distinct flavors too. And this is a good segue into our conversation later with Chef David Vargas, who's done a lot of work with corn in the Northeast, using techniques from his native Mexico. So, and speaking of Mexico, we were in New Mexico there for a minute with the Hatch green chili, one of my personal favorites as a chef. A few people have asked where they can get it, and if you distribute that people would like to get it directly from you if possible.
I don't do that. I barely get down to the Southwest, and especially this year. So there are a lot of people in the Southwest that process it. I mean, it's a huge deal down there in the fall, and it's just this wonderful experience. So you can always reach out to some of those tribes or do a quick search online. There are people that sell it and that you can get it to, and it's a little bit less processed or more authentic. It just takes a little bit of a Google search to be able to do that.
Okay, and we do have our handy technician here who is very good at finding links and putting them in the chat room. So I'm wondering if you can cite maybe a tribe or two that would be a good starting point for people looking for Hatch chilies.
Yeah, I can definitely take a look and see if there's any sources where they would send it out individually for that. But even if you haven't been able to do that, there are ways that you can get a hold of the Hatch green chilies. So I can do a search and put it in the chat when we get to our panel discussion.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. One person asked about nixtamalization and that process. If you can maybe do a very quick thumbnail on how you take your corn to that stage.
Sure. So when you have the seed, if you are nixtamalizing it, it's adding a hardwood ash to it, and then that really wakes up the nutrition that's inside of that seed, and it takes the hull off, the unprocessable hull. So you really, I'm trying to see if I have one here. You can kind of see it here on this one. When you nixtamalize it, you're able to take that part off, and then you're left with this wonderful inside that's the hominy. And this is the dried piece, but you can definitely do it and not have to dehydrate it. You can just use it freshly processed. So it's about adding a lye agent to your seed corn and then opening it up and kind of waking up all of those nutrients that are inside of there.
And you use boiling technique with water, do you not?
Yes, and it's, we do big batches and it takes us all day to be able to do it. But then after we dehydrate it, you only have to do it that one time, and then you have quite a bit afterwards. It just makes more sense to do it in a larger batch, but some people do smaller batch of hominy as well and then dehydrate it too. A lot of people treat it a little bit different. And like I said, even you can tell the difference between these two seeds. This is the ho-chunk seed and this is the Oneida seed, and their size is significantly different. So I might process the different corns a little bit different based on where they're at or what they would require for, preservation as well in the long term.
And I personally had a question about the ho-chunk corn, which looks beautiful. And I'm wondering if that is something that is distributed through Seed Savers or any other catalog represented here at the summit.
I do believe that, I don't know that Seed Savers has the ho-chunk corn, but I did work with my seed saver, who's Jessica Greendeer, to get some of this ho-chunk seed, and she's the one that grows it out for me as well. So I kind of get to have these relationships with the communities, and they are the ones that provide me with their ingredients, and I have the growers that work for me as well. And so in doing that, I'd have to still find out, because I know some of our ancestral seeds aren't accessible to the general public, and some they share on different levels.
Great. Thank you. And one other question I had was about the parboiling that you were doing with corn. Are you able to nixtamalize after you parboil? If you parboil something and parboil the kernels and then freeze them, how does that work?
You don't have to nixtamalize it after that. The parboiling is that process of softening the hull. And so once you do that and you freeze it or you dehydrate it, it's really already been cooked to that point. And the hull really hardens when it dries as a whole seed. So when you parboil it in a green stage or when it's still a wet corn, then you don't have to do that to take the hull off later. So parboiling, it takes out the step of nixtamalizing, but you end up with a different product in the end as well.
Okay. I do want to call people who are here participating in this presentation, which is wonderful. And thank you again so very much, Elena, to the information from Navajo Ethno-Agriculture about the hatch chilies, which I'm a little crestfallen reading that information, but I'm sure we'll have more commentary and information coming about that. So I think it's probably time, while Elena's casserole is in the oven, for us to move to Rob Connolly. And just want to make sure we're in a good space with time here. So Rob, who might be backstage in the waiting room right now, I would invite you to join us on the call. I think Rob is about to hop on. Hey, Rob, how are you?
Hey, I'm back. I'm doing great.
Welcome back. Great to have you. Super excited when I get to hear about a chef somewhere else in the country doing the kind of work that is so important to me personally, but also through our community activism in our region, that we've unearthed some pretty important ingredients and tried to perpetuate them and educate people about them. So it sounds like we're cut from the same cloth, Rob, and I am very pleased to introduce you with the background that you are currently the owner and chef of Bulrush in St. Louis, where you take on contemporary interpretations of historic Ozark cuisine. And Rob, to pause in the middle of your bio here, I'm curious about like when I say Osage versus Ozark.
So Osage is one of the two main indigenous people from the region, the other being Cherokee, and there's many more throughout history, but in the more modern times. Ozark refers specifically to a geographic region. So Osage are the people and Ozark is the region, and technically it's a plateau that defines that region.
Thank you. Very succinctly put. So the historic Ozark cuisine, meaning pre-1870, which focused on the contributions of the Osage people and the settlers and the enslaved. Previously, Rob operated the Curious Kumquat, a foraged food restaurant where he received the James Beard nomination for Best Chef Southwest. And now in his third career, as a chef, Rob previously worked in nonprofits in rural New Mexico and has advanced degrees in, of all things, sports psychology. So that is a Renaissance man, if ever I've seen one. And we are going to copy some links into the chat room here where you can find more information about Ozark cuisine and about Rob. So we're going to take it from here, Chef, if you are able to start your presentation.
Yeah, I would love to. And you say I'm a Renaissance man, but I'll tell you what, I make less money than I've ever made in my life, but I'm also happier than I've ever been.
I have no doubt.
Those grueling hours in the kitchen really suit me. And because of my background, especially with my doctorate from Purdue, I love research. And so I think when you say we're cut from the same cloth, to me that means the research geekery, the history geekery. I go down so many tangential rabbit holes, and this restaurant really is being defined by that. And I had no expectation of that when I opened. I guess I'll back up and just say, if I were to ask all the viewers today, all the attendees, what they think Ozark cuisine is, and feel free to drop them into the chat. I would love to see it. I know, even though my family's from St. Genevieve, Missouri since the 1840s, St. Genevieve at that time was the gateway to the Ozarks. It's right on the edge, the peripheral of that plateau I mentioned. But we certainly don't identify as Ozark people, even though technically I think we would be considered that. And so when I came back, I moved back from New Mexico to St. Louis, and I wanted to explore the food of my childhood. Of course, the food of my childhood is like Old El Paso, La Choy Chinese, you know, not high fancy foods. And I kept thinking about our family cabin, which is down in the Ozarks, and catching crawfish and getting bluegill and that kind of thing. And that led me to start exploring old church cookbooks, because all those old churches have them. And I knew that they would be honored if someone would actually want to see it. And so I started gathering them. I now have, I don't know, 30 or 40 of them, and they're all from the 60s through the 90s. And there were some interesting things in there. Just the other day, I got one from a church that was founded by freed slaves somewhat near Columbia, Missouri. And there's some really cool recipes in there. One is a baked raccoon, which I don't see in most of the other church cookbooks. Normally it's Jell-O salads and casseroles, which is what we would expect. But that led me to start looking at archives, because I started to ask myself, what is Ozark cuisine or Ozark food? And I knew that there's this stigma. The stigma really can be traced all the way back to 1907, 1904, Harold Bell's book, The Shepherd of the Hills. Some of you may have heard of it. That manifests itself in a number of ways. We learn later of Branson, Missouri, Silver Dollar City, Missouri. Even for those of you old enough, you'll remember the cartoon Lil Abner and that hillbilly culture that was defined by the media coming out. That all really goes back to Harold Bell. We can even look at the TV show Beverly Hillbillies. And if we look at modern times, we have the TV show Ozark, and you know, there's a few, well, Winter's Bone. It's all about isolationism, racism, and drug culture, and this hillbilly culture. And that is certainly a part of it, but certainly not what defines the Ozarks. And it just got me. I ended up at a bunch of archives. I don't know how chefs end up there, but I'm not the only one. And I started finding firsthand documents. And this is when it started getting exciting for me. Letters and journals from the early 19th century. And it was my opportunity to see handwritten letters. I don't work in digital in this just because of the connection I want. And reading these letters where they'll talk about being settlers, ending up in the area in some mountain village, and meeting the indigenous people, what they hunted, maybe what they grew in that first season. And it's really a snapshot into time, but more importantly for me, it's the storytelling that's happening. These are people who, in most cases, have been lost to time. Their stories have been lost to time. And it's giving me the opportunity to retell their story that comes from Hebrew scripture, midrash, where I fill in the gaps in an educated way. I don't just make up stuff. And so the food I create ultimately is a midrash on these original source letters and journals from the early 19th century. But in the process, I'm attracting a lot of geeky people. I can't believe how many paleoethnobotanists do you all know? I now have 3 that are good friends that were not connected to each other. But my biggest group is archivists. They're constantly reaching out and saying, have you seen this? Or come look at this. One of them, which is why I'm here talking today, is the archivist for the City of St. Louis Recorder of Deeds office. He reached out and I'm like, oh, this has got to be the most boring archivist in the city. Well, it wasn't. You know, his job is really to help people with genealogy, marriage licenses and whatnot. But he showed me this document from 1841. Poor Benjamin Reed was going bankrupt, and he had a seed store here in town. And they did an inventory of the seed store. And when he told me that he had this, I'm like, oh, so it's going to say cucumber, tomato, watermelon. He said, no, no, no. It has the 20 types of tomato, the 15 types of cucumber. I was excited. 1841, I know there's an older seed list, but I had not seen one, especially handwritten, with such specificity. And so I got a copy of this, along with some other things he gave me. You can ask me why my bar program is based on an 1830 inventory of a bar here in town. And so I take those, there were 95 seeds listed. 70 of them you could still find today on any seed list. So the 25 were the ones that were interesting to me, of course. Of those 25, 23 were available with a little digging and a little help, which is the connection here to this event. I sent a copy of the document to Philip Koth, who you'll see in the chat, and he's been helping out here, as well as Jared Gettle down at Baker's Creek. And I said, hey, I don't know if you've seen this, but here it is. And both of them reached out and said, this is really cool, and here's some more seeds you should know about. All of a sudden, this world opened up, and the idea of bringing back produce that has kind of been lost to time, and the importance of that from biodiversity and as a chef from flavor diversity, but for me personally, the storytelling potential. And so of these seeds, I know people are going to ask what some of them are. And there's some common ones that you can find: French sugar beets, flat Dutch cabbage, prickly spinach. These are all things I grew in my personal garden box. Some less common but really fun things, but still accessible: marrow fat peas, Cowhorn okra, which was one of our best crops of the year, and salsify. Salsify is interesting because in Europe it's super common, but in America it's pretty uncommon. I told all of my growers, I have 12 growers growing the 23 seeds. I said, anyone who wants to grow salsify, I'll buy every single piece of it. And it was the hugest hit of my fall and winter menu, because not one person who came into my restaurant in 3.5 months, had ever eaten salsify, and most had never heard of it. And yet they were all like, this is so delicious. And then there's some things that are gone to time, as best as I can tell. One on the list was rowan potatoes. I've been doing a lot more digging on rowan potatoes because if I can't have it, I want it. And so I'm finding hybrids that may have been derived from rowan and trying to get them in and grow those. So there's a lot of split offs of this before I wrap up and show you a few pictures. We also were already working with African-American African-American residents of the north side of St. Louis who were doing some growing, not farmers, just backyard growers, and working with organizations and resilience there. That led to us doing genealogic tracing of known freed slaves from the Ozarks. And just this week, we finished the genealogic tracing of 3 people and have all their living descendants, many of them in St. Louis. And so now the next step is talking to them, seeing if they knew this history, and seeing what their food traditions are currently, and seeing how it might tie to the research we've done for their ancestors and what that all means. That's not my story to tell, but I can't not do the research and explore the potential. And then there's, I don't know, I can go on and on and on. We're very geeky this way. I do want to show you some pictures because I can't show you corn that's going in my oven because I run a restaurant. I've got 20 things in the back and none of it looks like anything till I put the plate together. So I'm going to share my screen here. And okay, so the research, like I said, started with some old-timey cookbooks. This one is actually not a church cookbook. This is one of these touristy cookbooks. You can always tell because Granny's smoking a corncob pipe on the cover of the book. But they're still kind of fun to see how people perceive Ozark food or Ozark cuisine. This is some of the stuff I got to handle. This was at the Little Rock Public Library, Butler for Arkansas Studies. Only 2 people had checked this out before me. It's a family journal from 1843 to 1867, I think. And they kept meticulous notes about what they traded with their neighbors, what they owed the grocery store, what was being canned. Just a gold mine of information for me. and it's just also cool to hold on to. This is one of the pages of that document. These were huge ledger size sheets, so I had to bring them down and crop them and all. But you can glimpse a few things on here. I'm not going to let you linger too long just because I'd rather talk and answer questions. This is actually the first page of it. And there you'll see up near the top, that poor Benjamin Reed. And we did look at the city director. He got run out of town, apparently. He didn't exist even as a citizen the very next year. So that's one of the geeky tracings we want to do next, is find out what happened to Benjamin Reed and learn his story and then trace his family, just because why not? But let's show you some food. This is the Cowhorn Okra. I just had a backyard gardener do this for me. All my growers are volunteers. They sell me, and the rule is we do no risk. So if they get it out of the ground, I pay, and I pay premium, because I know they're taking the risk of dedicating their acreage to my produce. And if it doesn't come through because we don't know how this stuff will grow, I don't want them to be out that money. So I pay hefty prices, but I get some really wonderful stuff. This is something that came out of my garden. It was I think this was the Dutch flat cabbage. I had a number of them, so I don't know. You'll recognize the pretty wall behind there because that's behind me also. And yeah, we do make food and we try to make it fancy. When I say fancy, it's because people disparage Ozark food and Ozark cuisine. If I had anyone respond to my question at the beginning, my guess is, that's my timer saying you're talking too much. My guess is there's possum and raccoon and stuff listed. And we want to show people that there's a lot more to it. Produce is really important. And there's some indigenous stuff that we're interested about. This is what our kitchen looks like. And that's me, obviously, on the left. And that is that. So let me stop the sharing and pull out. Whew. I can talk forever. When you sit down for dinner, you get all these stories with each course. I try to make sure every course has the history and the relevance of why I'm serving it. We don't serve anything just because we think it's interesting. It has to be tied to the history in these documents.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chef. That was a very encompassing take on Ozark cuisine, and you know, like I said, I share your geekiness, so I'm sure just the two of us could go pretty deep into some of our respective regional food histories. There were some questions when you put it out there for people to pose their notion of what Ozark cuisine was. We got a lot of references to animals we don't see on menus very often, including raccoon, muskrat, and possum. You were the one who mentioned possum and raccoon, actually. Someone else mentioned muskrat. But there was a reference to wild game. So there's a belief, I think, that there's just a whole lot of wild game on either menus or in private homes. I'm not sure if that distinction was made. And someone else mentioned mushrooms, herbs, teas, fermented and brewed food and drink. And that was Jacqueline who weighed in with that. I think there are a lot of people who also want to hear more about salsify. And I do want to also say that last year I was able to get a local farmer here in New England to grow salsify. I've been trying to get a farmer to grow it for a long time. Ours came out really, really skinny. And so we're hoping next year we get a bigger, more girth in the salsify, if you will.
Yeah, so this is part of the learning, right? I mean, part of it for me is, why are these no longer common? And we know, without even asking which specific produce, we know part of it is it's not as prolific as things that people grow now. You know, people who are growing are trying to make a living. Salsify in particular, we know is not common because it's hard to get out of the ground. It's a deep root, and we had the same issue. We had a lot of thin ones. I look at all my chef friends in Europe with these huge salsify, and I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be nice? Because I have to do the same amount of cleaning work for way less product. But they have trouble getting out of the ground. So I talked to a number of my farmers, and I said, just a guess, they have to do their own research because I'm not a farmer, said it seems to me that a sandier soil would help it grow better and would make it easier to harvest. I don't know. This is part of the exploration that we're doing, though.
And there are different varieties of the family Scorzonera that you can find in Europe, but they're just very hard to get a hold of those seeds here. We do have it growing wild in parts of this country as well. And someone asked if your growers harvest salsify in the spring, and whether it's after one or more years of growing and how they rotate that. Because this person, Josh, is from North Dakota and says it mostly seems too woody to eat when he has harvested it.
Yeah, we had the woody issue with one of our growers, and we actually had the problem where people planted too soon and harvested too soon. They did late summer, and the other farmers, I said, sit on it. Everything I'm reading says you should be doing this super late fall, if not winter, and maybe even spring. And that salsify was much better. It turned out much better than the early harvest, and it was bigger. The woody issue, you know, there are better people than me to answer that question because I'm the guy who cooks it. But one of the things I say to my farmers is we do a zero waste kitchen, and we make sure our farmers are the same philosophy. And it's because when they throw produce in the compost bin, 9 times out of 10, I could have done something with it. Mm-hmm. I don't take a squash and put it on a plate. I process it. And so if you can't sell it at a farmer's market because it has blemishes or part of it started to rot, I don't care. Give me a decent deal. You're going to make some money. I get a good price, and I'm going to process it anyway. And so it's the same here. If you give me a woody salsify, I'm going to find a use for it. It may not be the more common roasted, sauteed salsify. It may become a salsify soda or a salsify kombucha or a salsify miso. You know, that's my job.
Have you fermented it, Rob? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, we did. We tried to ferment, and I said soda because, well, we did a salsify soda, and it was good. You know, we didn't make enough of it, so it lasted us on the menu for one weekend, and then it was gone.
I've wanted to ask another chef this for a really long time, and this is the moment. Salsify is also called oyster plant, and that derives, I believe, from the association of the flavor of oysters. Do you know that history? And can you tell me if you've ever eaten salsify and thought it tasted anything like an oyster?
To the last question, no, it doesn't taste anything like that. What's really confusing for me as a forager is we have a plant that we call oyster plant. It's a colloquial name. It's certainly not salsify. And in fact, I think the more common colloquial name is bluebell plant. It's blue something. And we get it in the early spring. It's one of the first forages we get, and it's always in sandy soil along creek beds. So there's a confusion too. That's where the problem with colloquial names comes in. And if we all could stay scientific, it would be great, but then I wouldn't know what I'm talking about anymore.
We get that with seafood as well all the time, the colloquial nomenclature issues. So these are way too short. I just want to say next time we do a seed summit, I'd like to have more time with chefs. This is really, really enjoying getting to know your work, all of you. But I think yeah, hi.
We have a whole Q&A after David gives his talk, so you guys are going to come back on and have time for more questions.
Well, great. Let's bring Dave on, and I can talk forever about Dave. But then first, let me just say thanks so much, Chef Rob. We look forward to hearing more from you during the Q&A, as Alex mentioned. Yeah, we're gonna go over to Dave, who's I think in the waiting room here. So let's see if we can do a chef swap. He is. Hello, David.
How are you?
Good, Chef. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
In full disclosure to everyone participating, David is a very good friend of mine, one of the great collaborators in our region, and an inspiration to me every day that I go to work. So that's not even the bio. That's just the preface to the bio. Thrilled to have you here. I especially like your backdrops. I see, yeah, our man. Beautiful. let me just give a quick intro for Chef David, who is the chef and owner of Vita Cantina, which is an award-winning restaurant in the Seacoast area of Portsmouth, New Hampshire and environs. And he brings to us his Mexican heritage and appreciation for local seasonal New England products to every plate at Vita Cantina. It has earned him a James Beard nomination twice, 2019 and 2020, for Best Chef Northeast. He grew up in Southern California, cooking family recipes with fresh local ingredients in his parents' taqueria. This is not part of his bio, but I happen to also know his dad is one of the most decorated, if not the most decorated, police officer in California history. If I'm maybe embellishing, but I don't think so. So in that taqueria, he learned to produce that cuisine while also living and sharing his Mexican culture with the world, and does that now in our region. His innate talent for fusing fresh and traditional flavors has earned him a place in our hearts, those of us lucky enough to be able to eat at Vita Cantina and the other restaurants that he's now involved in the Seacoast region. Over the last 5 years, David has also created direct relationships with farmers that have resulted, and at least one of those farmers, I believe, is going to be weighing in on this call, in a successful tortilla company that uses the locally produced corn and traditional varieties of it that can be traced back to his heritage. And that further, of course, cements the value and the values of the local food and community connections that you can find at his restaurants. So we'll leave it at that. I could go on, but let's stop there.
That is plenty for sure.
you got some things to say too, Dave. So I'm going to go away and let you talk now.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the intro. That means a lot coming from you for sure. It's hard to follow up this panel right here. I don't know why I was chosen to go last, but I'll take it for sure. So, like Evan said, I am the chef owner of Vita Cantina and the owner of Vita Tortilla, a local tortilla company using locally grown corn here in New Hampshire. And really what I'm going to be speaking about today. I am going to start by sharing my screen here, and you have to bear with me if it doesn't work, and I hope everybody can see it here. Let me see here. Yeah. Great. I'm better in the kitchen than I am on the computer, that is for sure. But growing up as a Hispanic, I was taught two things, family and food. That's what we know. That's what means a lot to us most. Family first, then food second, for sure. I never knew what kind of impact it was going to have on me growing up. I never knew eating, learning, and loving the food of my culture would turn into my life passion. Let me start by saying a simple saying that is very popular in Mexican culture. This is a painting that we have up in the restaurant. Sin maíz, no hay país. What does that mean? Without corn, there is no country. What is this? Why is it relevant? For over 10 years in Mexico, there have been multiple organizers that have been helping preserve the country's native corn varieties. It is a proposed law that will help recognize the native corn in Mexico as part of the country's food heritage, supporting the small farmers in so many ways, from creating seed banks and native corn varieties, while preserving the characteristics of the native corn. The corn is a staple of Mexican culture, and slowly I'm hoping to make it a diet here in New England in our own way. Over 4 years ago, through my good friend and moderator here and phenomenal local chef, Evan Mallet, I was introduced to the Cox family. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a picture here of Dorn is on the left and Chuck is on your right. The Cox family run and operate Tuckaway Farm in Lee, New Hampshire, here on the seacoast. At the time, my restaurant was already 3 years old, and I was on search of finding the best ingredients to produce some of the best tacos in the area. And it all had to start with a great tortilla. I knew I could import local heirloom corn from Mexico, but I wanted to start our own version of sin maíz, no hay país here in New England. Evan had told me the Cox family was growing different types of Flint and Denton corn for the purpose of cornmeal. The Cox family grew many different varieties, and after a little bit, there it is. Sorry about that. I grew to fall in love with this variety right here. This is called Autumn Explosion. This is a gorgeous variety from 2 harvests ago. This is where it all began. To make a great tortilla, also you have to master the cooking technique called nixtamalization, nixtamal, which we've been talking about a little bit in this panel already. The process of the corn cooking with the calcium to help break down the outside of the pericope of the corn, not only for milling purposes, but most importantly to help retain its nutritional value, really the niacin in it. I'm going to pull up a couple different pictures here. This is Dorn sorting through some of our corn that is getting ready to come over to the company as well. This is myself and Chuck looking at different varieties of corn. This right here is actually not the corn that we use on a regular basis. This is the Hopi Blue. So they did have many varieties, but in the end, this is what we fell in love with right here. The cooking process dates back to ancient Mayan culture, where they would use ash from their fires as calcium. And I found that it was amazing that we were doing it here on the seacoast of New Hampshire, using local New Hampshire corn. At the time, my restaurant wasn't very busy, and we had just hit our 3-year mark. So I thought hand pressing our tortillas was not very overwhelming. But soon we grew to find out that it wouldn't last long. As Vitas grew in popularity, so did our tortillas, and so did our relationship between us and the Cox family at Tuckaway. We went from pressing 3,000 tortillas a month to pressing 8,000 to 10,000 tortillas a month very quickly. And that's when I came up with this idea to create Vita Tortilla. Right now in the U.S., and sorry about that. Let me see here. There it is. Right now in the U.S., we are seeing a rise of Hispanic and Mexican people embracing their heritage by opening artisan tortilla companies. Most of these companies import heirloom varieties from Mexico. Thanks to the Sin Maíz No Hay País bill, we, on the other hand, wanted to do something that only few were doing and none were doing on our region. We wanted to produce tortillas using locally sourced corn. We did that. What did that mean to us? We did that. What did that mean to Tuckaway Farm? At this time, we were being supplied with 1 to 2 acres of corn just for my restaurant. How much more would we need if we were to open up a company and try to supply the greater seacoast with these in their local stores and homes? We opened the company in October of 2018. This is our mill right here, and this is our tortilla machine. We had this machine made for us from a gentleman out of Southern California. His name is Guillermo Campbell. And in 2018, we opened up this company in hopes the seacoast would embrace us. We knew people loved to eat tacos, and we knew people here loved to support local farms, so we took a chance on this venture. Fast forward 3 years, and this year we harvested 20 acres of our corn. In just 3 years, we went from 2 acres to 20 acres of corn, and this still blows me away. But it wasn't only that made it so special. There was a bigger picture, something that I came to call community to table, a different form of the ever so popular farm to table. It was a full circle. The practices that Tuckaway Farm committed to on their farm are those building a sustainable future. Healthy soil practices, regenerative farming are just to name a few a few ways the Cox family have carried out their love for their community. But it didn't stop there. The gratitude from all the people involved as well, from our dedicated employees to the customers who wanted healthy, delicious tortillas that are healthy for our planet. It was a collaborative effort, and we all played a part in it. This circular food economy, or regenerative practices that sequester carbon and feed us without harming and leaves us striving for a more symbiotic relationship. How did we get there? For us, we knew we had to bring on more farms. And so we asked our friends over at Barker's Farm and Doobie Doo Farm and see if they were interested in growing corn for our company. And they did not hesitate one bit. We also knew we wanted to grow more varieties, and we decided to grow out a heirloom variety called Wapsie Valley. I have a beautiful picture here of the Wapsie Valley. This is incredible variety here. The difference between what you see here and the Autumn Explosion has really nice nutty kind of flavor, whereas this Wapsie Valley, I have another picture of it right here, has a very like butternut squashed kind of corn carrot flavor. So the combination of the two, we have made tortillas where it's one kind and of just Autumn Explosion, and then we've also made varieties of just the Wapsie Valley, but the combination of the two together creates beautiful colors all the way through, and some of the most incredible flavors as well. Let's see here. We also know we want now what made these farms say yes to the crop? Like, especially when growing, first of all, it guaranteed that the crop, meaning it was a guaranteed crop, meaning I was guaranteeing that I would buy all the corn. Is definitely something that was very promising for most of these farms. It was also a relatively easy crop to grow for these farms, knowing that this much land would in the end turn around and make them that much of a profit. Also, the relationship in the end of what we were doing made it very helpful for them as well in deciding to grow out so much. Here. Over the last 2 years, especially during this pandemic, we have learned how to grow our business in many different ways and help improve our company. We have went from not only making artisan tortillas, we have also started making chips as well, and also flavored chips as well. This winter, we decided to do tamale kits. Oops. Sorry about that. There they are. Which were very popular over the holiday season. And then our biggest winner for the pandemic has been our frozen enchilada microwavable dinners made with the tortillas as well. We have been featured also on Weekend with the Yankees and Movable Feast with Relish. It is incredible to witness how strong the bond between farmers and chefs in their communities can transform a project so quickly. From 1 acre to 20 acres, from tortillas to microwavable dinners, we are helping build and preserve this corn. We have succeeded in building our own version of Sin Maíz, No Hay País, and we love our community and support. And they get to eat amazing tacos along the way. I have a picture here of some of the tacos we produce at the restaurant. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And of course, everyone who hasn't eaten for the last several hours just got to look at your tacos and enchiladas and is probably now like chewing on their knuckles. So thank you for that as well. We had a few things that came up. One of them is not insignificant for any of the 3 chefs we have here, 4 if you include me, and that is that no less an authority than Anna Moulet of Slow Food USA has proposed that there be a chef summit. So we have, post-pandemic, some work ahead of us, David, if we want to put together something like that. It's been well received by people on the call, to say the least. We also have a person who has weighed in a few times asking about poppability of Flint corn. And I don't know, David, if you've tried popping any of the varieties that I know you've been nixtamalizing it, but have you tried any of them as popcorn?
I have tried the Wapsie Valley. We haven't tried the Autumn Explosion, but the Wapsie Valley is incredible for sure. Great flavor all the way through. The Autumn Explosion, we call it our princess corn. It's a very delicate corn. And it's kind of, I feel like our Wapsie is starting to take on more of the acres now. So our princess is left to the tortillas.
Wonderful. We've got a few questions for the farmer that you work with, also my friend, Sarah Cox, about, and I actually worry about this all the time too, when we talk about corn and trying to remain true to variety, when of course, pollination on the wind is such a concern. Have you run into that issue? And is that one of the reasons why you went to Barker and to other farms when you had a farm with more land to grow corn on?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that. Say that one more time. I apologize.
Sure. Well, the pollination on the wind is a concern.
Oh, yeah.
Also, hybridization that happens accidentally through GMO corn in the neighborhood. Has that been an issue? Are you guys worried about that? And was that part of why you sought out other farms?
No, we decided to seek out other farms just to for areas for sure. But over at Tuckaway, they seem to have been practicing this way before we came on with them for the tortilla company. They were growing it for the purposes of cornmeal, and so they had their land pretty spread out for sure. I think they had seen some kind of cross pollination here and there, but nothing too major. I think Sarah could, or Dorn, I see Sarah's on this chat right now, but I think they could answer better. But it didn't seem like it was much of a issue. We did plant a different area that was a kind of a shared space, so we came off their farm a little bit just so we wouldn't have concern of that as well.
Great. And have you had a crop from the Wapsie that you've made into tortillas yet? I didn't hear if you said you have that product yet.
We have, yes. It's incredible.
Okay.
That is predominantly what Doobie Doo is growing for us. Over at Barker's, we kind of split it up as well.
And Wapsie Valley, is that originally, is it Vermont where that can be traced to?
Actually, I believe it's Ohio, if I remember correctly. I remember looking back to it, but I believe it is Ohio.
I asked because I've seen it on Vermont farms, but not elsewhere in New England until now.
Yep.
Great. I see Allison is here, and that means
I wanted to ask Sarah if she's not feeling shy, if she just wanted to pop in to say, well, if you don't want to, I get it. She just had knee surgery, so I know that she might not be feeling so well. But I thought it would be fun for people to see the farmer that you're working with, because Sarah is one of the primary farmers over at Tuckaway Farm. So if you want to come on, Sarah, just click the share video button. And if not, that's okay. And I think we're probably ready to bring the other chefs back on and go ahead and start the full-on question and answers, unless anybody has a specific other question for David. And with that, I'm leaving. Goodbye.
Thank you. We're not sure if Sarah's going to join, but I would also invite our other chefs to hop back on. I see Elena is on her way. Hello, Chef Elena. Welcome back.
Hello, thank you.
And there's Rob. Okay, Chef, we've got quite a quorum here now for questions that people are still talking about a Chef Summit excitedly. And kudos on the presentations, everyone. I'm looking through these, scrolling here through the same chat room that you guys have access to. Some clarification on the Wapsi variety, which is a dent corn, not a Flint corn. Okay, I think we're okay. Sarah's not going to join us. Fully understand, having just had surgery and in the process of recovering, probably under the influence of some pharmaceuticals as well. Super inspiring stuff, all three of you, and well wishes for Sarah. Who can tell us? Who can tell all of us about parching? We've had a few people referencing that. Elena, is parching the same as parboiling? Is that what they're referring to?
I don't think so. I think they're talking about like toasting it before you finish processing it, which gives it a different level of flavor. And you can really change and infuse some of those flavors by how you process the corn. I'm sure David can agree with me that, I mean, I love the science part of it. And even in some tribes for us, like my good friend Tanya from Six Nations Canada leaves her corn nixtamalizing in the ash a little bit longer, and it has a little bit more of this like deep ash aftertaste, but it kind of makes the corn pop with this different flavor when you initially taste it. So there's a lot of different techniques that you can add to the process of nixtamalizing your corn, which will greatly evolve that flavor or you infuse it. And parching is one of the things, like we would toast some of the corn first and then nixtamalize it, and it gives it a different depth of flavor.
Great, thank you for that. And on the topic of nixtamalizing, we mentioned how that process can bring out the nutritional contents of the corn that are sometimes unavailable to us when the hull is still on the corn kernel. That we had someone who asked how, as chefs, you are learning about the nutritional aspects and applying those to your cooking styles. I think this is maybe specific to corn, but I think it could also be applied to anything. And I kind of want to point to Rob here and say that in the research that you've done, you were trying to focus a little bit on plants, you said, more so than the animal proteins in the region. And did you, as a forager, when you're looking at some of these older ingredients, how much is their nutritional quality a part of that process for you?
Yeah, it's actually a big part. One of the partners that we've gained through this process is the Danforth Plant Science Center. And Allison Miller there is, she works there, and she's also a professor at St. Louis University. And she has offered to do nutritional analysis of all sorts of ingredients. And where I took her up on it was forage, because you know, chefs love to serve forage, but they have no idea what it is oftentimes. And before her, my go-to reference, someone asked about indigenous knowledge also, and this comes into that answer as well. I start with Daniel Moorman's books. He has the ethnobotany of food and medicine, and I use the medicine book. And one of the interesting things about that is I'm constantly questioning is that a colonialized perspective or is it authentic? Because he gathered the information from tribal people, but then he wrote the book. So, you know, there's more work that needs to go there. But it's a great starting point to look at what ancient wisdom has viewed as safe to eat and how it might affect the body. And then that, in partnership with my later relationship with Allison Miller.
Yeah, I've got a little glitch in the matrix here, Rob. I don't know if you can hear me. I think there are a few things that Rob just mentioned that I'd love to see some links to for people who want to dig a little deeper. Daniel Moorman, I think, was the name of the ethnobotanist who's done some writing whether colonialized or not, that might be valuable. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Andrew, for weighing in with that information as well. Also, the Danforth Science Center, while we still have Rob in freeze frame here, I'm going to defer any direct questions for him until he's back with us. Interesting question from Jolene, which is, and she is in northern Nova Scotia. We have a strong eat local food movement, but there seems to be a deep divide in the regional plate that leaves out Indigenous voices. Do any of you have suggestions about how we can use our heirloom seed collection to help decolonize our food plates? What a great question, and a nice segue from that last one. Elena, I think you're muted right now. Is there,
Yeah,
would you be
I'm
willing
here.
to field that question?
Sure. So I think the more that you grow, the more of a connection that you have to some of those ancestral things. And for me, I like to approach it as a slow reintegration into the diets, and exposing the ingredients in a non-intimidating way makes it a little bit more, I guess people want to eat it a little bit more, you know, and it's not something that's unattainable. It's something that they can do and continue to do. So sometimes when you eat out and you have a meal and you have no idea on how you would ever be able to duplicate or replicate anything like that at home or with the ingredients that you have accessible, then I think some of that is just saying that, you know, you don't have to have this one variety of corn, or you don't have to have one okra, but using what you have access to in ways that you can build on those flavors, and you're exposing your family or your community to those flavors. I think it just naturally starts to happen where you want them more and you want them in your cooking a little bit more. And so it's not something that, I mean, for me personally, if I look at it, tomorrow I'm going to change everything about the way I'm eating. It's not going to last farther than tomorrow, you know. But if you start using some of those heirloom seeds and bringing those ingredients in ways that people can relate and appreciate, it has a little bit longer of a lasting effect.
Great, and welcome back, Rob. Good to have you again.
Missed you.
We missed you too. Thank you also, Elena, for that. And I loved earlier in your presentation when you used the phrase, slow changes make permanent changes. And it sounds like that approach has been very effective for you. Something that I like to do is go straight to the children. And David has been really active in his community, working directly with schools to talk about some of the work that's important to him and, you know, to us as we try to build a stronger food system and dealing with social justice as well. Like, he's in the schools, on the line, in the cafeteria, talking directly to the kids. Not right now during pandemic. Don't be alarmed, everyone. But you know, this is a big part of who he is, and I feel like sometimes we can't make these connections to make those big changes with the adult generation right now. But you can get through to kids who take that information home, they tell their parents, and that's a good technique that's worked for us. It's subterfuge in a way, but it's been very, very effective. I did have a specific, well, this is actually related to when we were talking about colonialism, and Rob, that was the last we heard from you. Someone named Kelda weighed in. Any thoughts on how these destination restaurants, and that you all have destination restaurants, can minimize impacts of gentrification? It's really huge how much each of you care about your communities. I know this isn't a seed question, but also ties into urban gardening and this audience today. Anyone want to take that one on?
I mean, I could start with this one right here. You know, I think what we have to do is, I think it's exactly right. You know, we care about our communities and our food systems for sure, but we have to look at our communities deeper for sure, and taking active roles in not just, you know, becoming these destinations where all of a sudden the prices of our surrounding areas rise so much that it's many people. I can say for myself, growing up in Southern California in a very Hispanic rural area, I guess not rural, but Hispanic area, you know, watching the gentrification of my town happen was a sad thing to see, you know, basically our family's being pushed out. So we have to realize that these are the people that make up our community and how we can continue to support them, because we know this is how this era became. So I think using our restaurants and our voices on a constant is something that we have to continue to do, not just just not through our food, but just using our platforms on a constant, on a daily, and just realizing that this is something that is going on, and it's unfortunate for sure.
So because there's more work that goes into all three of your restaurants and the food that you're serving, someone asked the very simple question, like, how do you educate your consumers? What techniques, what tools, what resources are currently in place that you use to communicate the things that you're passionate about to the people who are dining in your restaurants and eating your food?
Well, I'll jump in and say I'm a restaurant, not a museum. And I know that some people would enjoy a 30-minute discussion of my choices, but I think it's more appropriate for me to give them 2-minute snippets. And one of the really cool things that has happened during COVID is, whereas before I would deliver a course of food and give a 2-minute snippet and then move on to the next customer and the next course, now we do QR coded videos. And so anyone right now can go to our restaurant's YouTube page, and you'll see all the courses we've done since we started that back in maybe October. And each of those has the story in it, because it has to be relevant. If we transition to this pedantic place, then we're going to lose people. And for me, it's I want people who don't come in looking for an education, who come in looking for a meal, to leave wanting to know more about what we've just talked about.
Great, thank you guys. Well, our technical advisor, Phil, asked a question a little while ago. I'm trying to find it now. It was about food exoticism. Oh, it's simply, is there a concern about creating food exoticism? And maybe that's a form of gentrification in and of itself. Does anyone want to comment on that? I'm glad I don't have to. Let me say that.
Well,
I can say a little something about
please,
that.
Please.
So for me, I love cultivating, but I'm a butcher. I'm a trained wild game specialist. And I know that there was some talk about muskrats even, and that's something that in the woodland area where my tribe is from, we have, and it's a delicacy, and we save that for certain times. And there is some focus that is on the exoticism that other people see it is our norm, or even when you talk about gentrification and cultural appropriation, one of the big things lately is food is medicine. And how can you replicate that when you really can't, and for me, we do community outreach catering, and Wild Berries is bringing people that are overcoming AODA or emotional trauma back to our community through food. And that's what the work that I do with Wild Berries. And for me, it is the act of interacting with the gardeners and my growers, or being in the land that these foods are growing in, and knowing that they're being cared for daily, and me being able to be a part of that, or me harvesting an animal that a hunter brought to me and processing it or something. All of that is the medicine, and it's my medicine, and it's unique to me, and it can't be duplicated, but it's very healing and for my community, and all of these different aspects of a meal that go into that, the care from, like, my aunt processing the chilies and sending them to me, that is a healing process for her. And some of that, as much as some people might want to pursue it, it's unique to me and Elena specifically. So the meals that you would get from me aren't going to be the same. Although I'm sure David or Rob cook with that same kind of intention, their process and their passions are unique to them, and it's not replicable, and it isn't exotic. It's us. It's who we are, and it's what we care about. And we put I don't know a chef that doesn't put some sort of intention in the meals that they cook. And when you think about the greater community and how much every person contributes to the end product of what we kind of get to own at the end, you know, we get to serve it and say that's what we're the voice of all of those ingredients. I think that you can't use words like that, like exoticism. It's real, and it's everything and every aspect of every person that touched all of the ingredients leading up to what we get and what we're able to present to somebody. It can't be replicated, and I don't like using the words like exoticism. Those animals, the way we're taught is, you know, they tribute themselves to feed our spirits. They're giving themselves, and they're playing the role that they have in our food system. And I saw some people get a little intimidated by some of the ingredients that Rob talked about and those animals. And if you prepare them right, which we gained some of that ancestral knowledge, some of the technical knowledge and the food science knowledge, and we're able to combine that in a way that hopefully you're not intimidated by the word raccoon or muskrat, but you're like, what an incredible opportunity to taste something beautiful that has been prepared with intention and mindfulness. So I don't like using words like that might, you know, romanticize it or make it seem exotic. You know, that word in itself, I can tell you what comes to mind when I hear the word exotic, and it's not my food at all. So I think it's how we approach looking at it in the end, and what each chef and each community individually has is so unique in the way they combine it in those visions. I mean, anybody that's been in the kitchen cooking for a higher level dish or you know, how can you not get that corn that, you know, Sarah might have grown and she spent all this time and attention so that David has the best of the best. I mean, I was looking at those pictures and drooling. I can't believe, I wish that I could get some of those tortillas and stuff. Like, it's just amazing. And it's so unique that you can't really call it exotic. You just have to appreciate it for its individual nature and what each chef or each cook produces and how it relates to them personally. And it's not replicable, you know, and you don't get that from mass production either.
That's really powerful. Thank you so much, Elena. So many things I got out of that. One of my favorite parts of that is the humility in recognizing that we're the last one to see the food, therefore we get the credit. But there's an entire food supply chain of livelihoods and passion that went into it right from the beginning. So that's just a beautiful sentiment that I would like to see every chef embrace. And I know the ones on this panel do. So thank you all for that. And also, when we talk about being intimidated by raccoon or muskrat or walrus, although I don't know how much walrus is consumed, and that's not relevant to any regions here. But I thought about that book that you showed, Chef Rob, one of in your collection as the archivist that you were working with. The subtitle of one of those books was "Old, Odd, Unusual," as though that was a selling point. And imagine now if you're trying to write your cookbook and you use as your subtitle "Old, Odd, and Unusual." If that were the tagline of my restaurant, which some people actually say it is, I'd be financially doomed, right? Which I almost am. So I just think, like, how do we get back to that culture where we are celebrating the unique ingredients, the hard to find ingredients, the ones that we're trying to bring back because they represent our regional heritage? Like, I don't know how we get there, but I really love that we've touched on that and trying to get the general public to open their palates and minds.
Yeah, I think a lot about the humble acorn and just all the baggage that we as a country have behind the acorn, even though it's fed people for eternity. And we know why it has baggage. And yet when I put it on a plate, and I do a lot of acorn here at the restaurant, the response is almost always, I thought it was poisonous. And maybe you'll get someone who says, oh, that's for the pigs. Well, that's part of that baggage that was imposed on the lands. And it drives me nuts. And I think about the Andrew Zimmern culture. Now, maybe it's because I haven't
Mm.
been featured on Andrew Zimmern and everyone else seems to have been. So maybe it's petty jealousy. But the idea of bizarre foods, there's no bizarre foods.
Right.
It's someone's food. And it may be bizarre to you, but that says more about you than about the food and the person who ate it. And again, acorns to me is a good example that that's not bizarre at all. That's sustenance. It's a really good food. And for some reason, we don't eat it.
Right. It's somewhat labor intensive, and that's arguably one of the reasons. A lot of the foods that have been extirpated from our diet are difficult to work with by modern standards, but you don't have to go back very far to recognize that that kind of labor in the kitchen, whether it was at home or professionally, was par for the course. And I think that's also something we need to recognize. Can you repeat, Kate just weighed in, what the full title is of the book? It was maybe Miss Lizzie. Was that the cookbook that you had? The Old, Odd, and Unusual as a subtitle, Rob?
Yeah, I'll have to pull it up. Obviously, I had technical difficulties and everything shut down on me.
Well, you survived.
Keep talking and I'll be able to have it here in just about 30 seconds.
Okay, there's a great debate going on in the chat room with some people weighing in about appropriation, gentrification, and interesting note from Jen here says, restoring and reclaiming and honoring diversity is reparation, not exoticism. I think it does depend a lot on perspective. That's me saying that, not her. And centuries of industrialization and monoculture have so damaged modern culture. And, in that sense, have also erased a lot of traditional culture. So thank you, Jen, for weighing in with that perspective.
I could share that book real quick.
Great.
Sorry to do it through screen share, but I don't have my readers on, so I can't actually see it. And I'll say, well, so there it is. I'll say we have about 30 of this genre of books, and almost everything we do is in Google Doc, and I'm always happy to share with anyone who wants to be included in the sharing of those Google Docs. So Ms. Jessie's Gathering.
Great. And a few people have commented on the whole acorn topic, and Seth weighed in that if we can nixtamalize corn and process wheat, we sure as hell can process acorns. So I think that is a dropped gauntlet for any of us to figure out how to, and we have to beat the squirrels to them. So yeah, I think there's a prospective future for acorns in the American diet. I'm hopeful that there is. And if we've been able to process other foods, why not acorns? Is a great question. Does anyone have? I mean, that was not an actual question to you all, but if you have an answer as to why we don't process acorns in modern culture, I'd love to know. Maybe we just don't want to chase the squirrels.
Yeah, I will say that in our kitchen, because we're more contemporary, that process of flushing out the tannins that most people do, old time in the creek, modern time, well, somewhere in between times in the toilet tank and then modern times on the stovetop. We do it in a vacuum chamber sealer, and that process is done in 7 minutes.
Really?
So, yeah, so it can very easily be done. But for us, it's a matter of getting it out of the shell, and that's why we get a keg and a bunch of pizzas and invite our friends.
I think also, so for me, I'm a processor. I love doing that. I love taking the time to do it. And you can, I think some of the reason that we did move away is because you do these large batch processing now, and it's out of convenience, even with, arts and food sourcing, all of that. But when you take the time to do it, and even if it is, being able to pressure cook it, it's being able to transform that, and taking the time that you need to take to transform it correctly, you develop flavors and textures that you can't mimic other ways. And so sometimes it is getting a group of friends together and, processing acorns or corn or whatever it is that you're doing, and taking the time to do it, and just being mindful of the process that you're doing.
You mentioned an Instapot preparation. Elena, I don't want to end this session, which has been so thought-provoking and mind-blowing, without seeing the finished casserole. Is that out of the oven yet? Yes. Beautiful. Oh, I want it so badly.
Take me. So yes, I had to move so that my kids could go to the kitchen and get their lunch. And so yeah, I just sprinkled a little bit of the saffron flowers on top, and it's ready to go. And I like to say that just because, you know, I am a single mom and I have kids at home, and sometimes I don't have the time to say, okay, I'm going to nixtamalize this whole pot of corn for dinner, you know, and I use the convenience of technology and equipment just to be able to execute some of that stuff. But I'll tell you, me doing that is out of convenience, and it is relatable because a lot of people are in that situation where they don't have a whole day to process corn or to cook it. But when you do have the time to do that, it's the whole medicine part, it's the healing part, it's the touching the corn and smelling it and all of those textures that implant memories on how to continue doing that. And it's crucial that we keep up some of those traditional practices, so the future will always have that knowledge, and the next generations will have that exposure to the process and the way things should smell or the way they look. And, you know, for my one daughter, we used to hang a traditional swing in the trees at my grandma's house, and she was a month old the first time we exposed her to our corn processing, which is like a month-long thing that we do here in Wisconsin with our families. And it's just a great time. And I can remember when I was young and being around my great grandma and my grandmothers, and it's those times that we get to spend interacting really with our food sources that make sure that that knowledge gets shared on that way, and that they long for those experiences again in the days that we get to spend time together like that. I think during COVID now, it's been definitely felt that we haven't been able to interact on those levels and be around those certain situations. If it's processing acorns or regular corn or beans or however it is, there's a lot of purpose and mindfulness that goes into those actions. And so I do both. You know, I have to use the convenience of regular equipment as well. And I definitely did today, just to show that you can do that and you can still appreciate those flavors and have that connection through the food.
Well, that is a really great way for us to end it, with a lot of, and not to take it to a materialistic level here, but I certainly hope there will be an Elena Terry cookbook in the future, looking at modern techniques for using some of those indigenous foods. And I will certainly be first in line if there is. You guys are all great, and I do have to prep for this next call in just a couple minutes. So we've had lots and lots of really great comments in the chat room. I hope you all have a chance to read the ones that I haven't shared with you. Please take the time to do that. And everyone who's been listening, thank you so much. We hope to see you at the next session. And please follow these chefs as they do their good work around the country. We've got 3 very different regions represented here, and it's encouraging and heartwarming to know that we have that kind of love in our chef community. So cheers to you guys. Thank you so much for being part of this.